The first gunshot didn't sound real. It blended into the fireworks, just another loud crack in the sky, until my daughter screamed. She dropped to the frozen pavement, clutching her side, blood spreading through her jacket as her dog collapsed beside her, motionless. People froze. Music stopped, and standing just a few feet away, holding the smoking gun with both hands, was our HOA Karen. It was New Year's night. Families were celebrating. Kids were laughing. And yet, in that moment, the woman who claimed she was protecting the neighborhood had just shot a 12-year-old girl and her dog over a rule she invented in her head. As I ran toward my daughter, screaming her name, the HOA Karen didn't panic. She didn't help. She simply looked at me and said, "I warned you." What happened next didn't just expose her lies. It shattered her life, ended the HOA's power, and revealed a truth no one was prepared for. Before I take you back to the moment that changed our lives forever, I want to ask you something simple. Where are you watching this video from right now? Which city, which state? Drop your city name in the comments below. I read every single one, and it reminds me how many of us are connected by stories like this. And if you believe real stories about power, abuse, and justice deserve to be heard, take a second to subscribe to this channel. These stories matter, and your support helps them reach people who need to hear them. Now, let me be clear about one thing. This isn't a story about a misunderstanding. This isn't about both sides. And it's definitely not about a simple HOA rule violation. This is about what happens when someone is given authority they were never meant to have, and how quickly that authority can turn into cruelty. It was New Year's Eve, the kind of night that's supposed to feel hopeful. Fireworks echoed across the neighborhood, laughter spilled from open doors, and families stepped outside to welcome a fresh start. No one was thinking about danger. No one was expecting violence, especially not my daughter. She was just a kid, excited to see the fireworks up close, walking our dog like she'd done 100 times before. She had no idea that a neighbor was watching her, not with concern, but with anger. She had no idea that a single decision, made in seconds, would leave scars that still haven't healed. What you're about to hear is uncomfortable. It's emotional, and it proves how fast a normal night can turn into a nightmare. So take a breath, and let me take you back to how this all began. New Year's Eve had always felt like a reset button in our house. No matter how hard the year had been, no matter what we had lost or survived, that final night always carried a quiet promise that tomorrow could be better. We weren't party people. We didn't host loud gatherings or drink until midnight. Our tradition was simple: dinner together, a little music, and just before midnight, stepping outside to watch the fireworks light up the sky. That night was no different. Snow still clung to the edges of the sidewalks, packed down into icy patches from weeks of foot traffic. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that made your lungs sting when you breathed too deeply. From inside the house, I could hear fireworks popping in the distance, scattered and uneven, like the city was clearing its throat before the big moment at midnight. My daughter, Lily, hovered near the front door, bundled up in her winter jacket, her gloves already on. She was 12, still at that age where excitement came easily and fear hadn't fully learned how to control her yet. Our dog, Max, sat patiently by her feet, tail thumping against the floor every time a firework cracked outside. "Can I take Max out for a minute?" she asked, trying to sound casual but failing completely. "Just around the block. I want to see the fireworks closer." I hesitated, not because I didn't trust her. Lily was responsible, careful, and gentle with Max. But our neighborhood had changed over the past year, and not in ways that made me comfortable. The HOA had always been annoying, letters about trash cans, warnings about lawn height, but recently it felt more aggressive, more personal. And at the center of all of it was one woman. Everyone knew her. No one liked her. And everyone feared crossing her. The HOA Karen. She lived a few houses down, always dressed neatly, always watching. She'd complained about kids riding bikes too fast, about holiday decorations staying up too long, about people parking a few inches over an invisible boundary. She had called the HOA on neighbors during Thanksgiving. She had threatened fines on Christmas Day. Still, I told myself I was overthinking it. It was New Year's Eve. Families were everywhere. Fireworks were legal. Nothing was going to happen. Okay, I said finally, but stay on the sidewalk. Don't go far. And come back as soon as you're done. Lily smiled, clipped Max's leash onto his collar, and pulled her hat down over her ears. I will. I promise. I watched her step outside, the cold air rushing in for a moment before the door shut again. Through the window, I saw her walking slowly down the sidewalk, Max trotting beside her, his breath puffing out in little white clouds. Everything looked peaceful. Across the street, neighbors stood in their driveways, holding sparklers or cups of hot chocolate. Kids laughed as fireworks burst overhead, splashing color across the dark sky. It felt like one of those moments you don't realize is precious until it's gone. Then I noticed a porch light flick on. It came from 3 houses down. Her house. The HOA Karen's front door opened, and she stepped outside, her movements sharp and deliberate. She wasn't dressed for celebration. No smile, no drink in hand. Just a red sweater, black pants, and that familiar tight expression on her face, the one that always meant trouble. My stomach tightened. She didn't look at the fireworks. She didn't look at the neighbors. She looked straight at my daughter. I leaned closer to the window, unease creeping up my spine. I watched as she started walking toward Lily, her phone already raised, camera pointed forward. Even from a distance, I could tell she was recording. Lily noticed her too. She stopped walking. Max sat down beside her, trained and calm. I saw Lily glance back toward our house, like she was checking to make sure I was still there. I couldn't hear what was being said at first, but I could see the tension building in Lily's shoulders. The HOA, Karen, was talking fast, her hands moving sharply, her phone never lowering. Lily shook her head and gestured toward our house, pointing with a gloved hand. My dad said, "It's okay," she said, her voice finally carrying just enough for me to hear through the open window crack. The HOA Karen stepped closer. Too close. "This is private HOA property," she snapped. "You're not allowed to be out here with a dog." That wasn't true. Everyone knew it wasn't true. But rules, to her, were weapons, not guidelines. Max let out a single bark. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't loud. Just a warning, the kind dogs give when they sense their owner is uncomfortable. The HOA Karen recoiled like she'd been attacked. "Control your animal," she shouted. I was already reaching for my coat, my instinct screaming that this wasn't going to end well. I opened the front door just as I saw her reach into her purse. At first, I assumed she was pulling out something ridiculous, a citation, a whistle, another phone. Then I saw the metal. For half a second, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. A gun. My heart slammed against my ribs as I shouted Lily's name, my voice tearing through the night. Fireworks exploded overhead at the same moment, masking the sound, swallowing my scream. The HOA Karen's hands shook, not with fear, but with fury. Lily froze, her eyes wide, her body locked in place. And in that instant, before I could take a single step closer, before anyone could stop her, the HOA Karen raised the gun. Time stretched thin. Everything that happened next would shatter our lives, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The first gunshot didn't sound like a gunshot. It cracked through the air almost gently, swallowed by the fireworks exploding overhead, blending into the chaos of celebration. For a split second, my mind tried to reject it, tried to convince itself that what I'd heard was just another firework, another harmless noise marking the end of the year. Then Lily screamed. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was pain. Pure, raw pain that cut through everything. Her body jerked backward, as if the ground had yanked her down. She hit the pavement hard, the sound dull and sickening, her hands flying to her side as blood immediately soaked through her jacket. Her face twisted in shock, confusion, and terror, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't believe what had just happened to her. I took one step forward. Then the second shot fired. This one was louder, sharper, clearer. Max let out a short, broken yelp before his body collapsed beside Lily's, the leash slipping from her shaking hand. His legs twitched once, then went still, his head resting awkwardly against the icy concrete. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Not the neighbors. Not the people holding sparklers. Not even the HOA Karen. The world seemed to pause, as if it, too, needed a moment to process what had just happened. Then everything exploded. Someone screamed. Another person shouted, "Oh my God!" Doors flew open up and down the street. A woman dropped her phone, the screen shattering as it hit the sidewalk. Fireworks continued to burst overhead, cruel and celebratory, lighting up a scene that no celebration should ever illuminate. I ran. I don't remember crossing the street. I don't remember my feet hitting the ground. All I remember is Lily's face pale and twisted in pain, and the dark stain spreading beneath her. I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands shaking as I pressed them against her side, trying desperately to stop the bleeding even though I had no idea what I was doing. "Dad," she cried, her voice small and breaking. "It hurts. I can't feel my leg." My stomach dropped. "You're okay." I lied, my voice cracking. "You're okay. Stay with me. Look at me." Her eyes darted toward Max. "Is Max okay?" she whispered. I followed her gaze. Max wasn't moving. His chest wasn't rising. His eyes were half open, glassy, unfocused. Blood stained the fur around his shoulder, dark against the golden color we had brushed just hours earlier. I couldn't answer her. I couldn't lie about that. Behind us, the HOA Karen finally reacted, but not the way you'd expect someone to react after shooting a child. She stepped backward, holding the gun away from her body now, her phone still clutched in her other hand, recording everything. Her face wasn't panicked. It wasn't horrified. It was defensive. "He charged me," she said loudly, her voice trembling but controlled. "The dog charged me. I had to protect myself." That wasn't true. Everyone there knew it wasn't true. Max had never left Lily's side. "I warned them," she continued, speaking as if she were explaining a minor inconvenience. "I told them they weren't allowed out here." I looked up at her, my hands slick with my daughter's blood, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "She's a child." I screamed. "You shot a child." She didn't lower the gun. She didn't apologize. She just took another step back and repeated. I felt threatened. Someone finally called 911. I heard it faintly, like it was happening underwater. A man shouted that a girl had been shot. A woman cried into the phone, her voice hysterical, saying she thought the dog was dead. Lily whimpered in my arms, her body starting to shake uncontrollably now as shock set in. I wrapped my jacket around her, pressing harder against the wound, begging her to stay awake. "Don't close your eyes," I said. "Please, Lily. Talk to me." Her breathing came in shallow bursts. "I was just watching the fireworks," she whispered. "I didn't do anything wrong." Those words broke something inside me. Behind us, the HOA Karen finally set the gun down on the ground, but only after someone shouted at her to do it. She raised her hands slowly, her movements exaggerated, as if she were the victim in all of this. Red and blue lights began to flash at the end of the street, reflecting off the houses, the cars, the snow. Sirens grew louder, cutting through the fireworks, through the screaming, through the shock that still hung in the air. Police cars skidded to a stop. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Hands where we can see them. Step away from the weapon." The HOA Karen immediately began talking. She spoke fast, confident, certain. She told them she'd been threatened. She told them the dog had lunged. She told them she'd acted in self-defense. She told them she feared for her life. I watched as one officer gently pulled me away from Lily so paramedics could reach her. I resisted, at first, panic flooding my chest, until they promised me they would take care of her. They cut her jacket open. They pressed gauze to her wound. They loaded her onto a stretcher as she cried out in pain, calling my name over and over. I tried to follow. A hand grabbed my arm. "Sir, I need you to stay right here," an officer said firmly. I turned, my heart pounding again, but this time not just from fear. The HOA Karen stood a few feet away, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, speaking calmly to another officer. She was crying now, but something about it felt practiced, and then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. One officer nodded as she spoke. Another wrote in a notebook. They were listening to her, really listening. As the ambulance doors slammed shut and sirens wailed again, this time carrying my daughter away, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. In fact, it felt like the fight was just beginning, and I had a sinking feeling that the truth was about to be buried, unless something or someone stopped it. The ambulance disappeared down the street, its siren fading into the distance, and for the first time since the gunshots, the fireworks finally stopped. The sudden quiet felt wrong. The street was still lit by flashing red and blue lights, their reflections dancing across frozen lawns and darkened windows. Neighbors stood in small clusters, whispering, some crying, some recording on their phones, all of them shaken. The night that was supposed to welcome a new year now felt heavy, poisoned by fear and disbelief. An officer guided me toward the curb and told me to sit down. I didn't want to sit. I wanted to be with my daughter. My kid's in that ambulance, I said, my voice hoarse. I need to go with her. You will, the officer replied, not unkindly. But first we need to get a statement. I looked past him and saw the HOA Karen standing near the front of her house, wrapped in a gray blanket. Her gun lay on the ground several feet away, tagged and photographed. She was talking animatedly to two officers, her hands moving as she spoke, tears streaking down her face. From a distance, she looked like a woman in shock. Up close, I knew better. She glanced over at me and quickly looked away, her expression tightening for just a moment before returning to one of trembling innocence. Even now, she was performing. An officer knelt in front of me and turned on a small camera clipped to his chest. Sir, he said, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw. I took a deep breath and started from the beginning. Lily asking to walk the dog, the confrontation, the gun coming out of the purse. My hands shook as I spoke, my clothes still stained with Lily's blood. Halfway through, the officer held up a hand. So the dog barked, he asked. Yes, I said. Once. He didn't move. He didn't lunge. The officer nodded, but his expression didn't change. Did you see the dog advance toward her? No, I said firmly. He never left my daughter's side. He scribbled something down. A few feet away, I could hear the HOA Karen's voice rising. She was scared. She was saying loudly, the dog came at me. I've had issues with those people before. I felt threatened. Those people. I clenched my jaw. Another officer approached me, his tone less gentle. Sir, is it true you've had previous disputes with this neighbor? He asked. Yes, I replied. Because she harasses everyone. That doesn't mean she gets to shoot my kid. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he asked for my ID. I handed it over, watching as he walked back toward his cruiser, my stomach twisting. I had a horrible, sinking feeling that the narrative was already being shaped, and it wasn't in my favor. When the paramedics finally gave me permission to leave for the hospital, I felt relief crash over me like a wave. But it didn't last. As I stood up, an officer stopped me again. Sir, he said carefully, we're not placing you under arrest, but we do need you to understand that this is an active investigation. I stared at him. My daughter was shot. What are you saying? I'm saying, he continued, that there are conflicting accounts of what happened. I knew exactly whose account he meant. At the hospital, the world narrowed down to white lights, antiseptic smells, and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Lily was rushed into surgery almost immediately. A nurse took my jacket, my phone, my wallet, everything, and left me sitting alone in a hard plastic chair, staring at the floor. Hours passed. I replayed the scene over and over in my head. Every detail burned into my memory. The way Lily froze, the way Max fell, the way the HOA, Karen never once ran, for help. At some point, a detective approached me. He introduced himself, sat across from me, and folded his hands together. We've reviewed some initial statements, he said. Right now, the shooter is claiming self-defense. I laughed, a short, broken sound. Against a 12-year-old? She says the dog lunged. He replied, and that your daughter was unable to control it. I leaned forward. There were people everywhere. Cameras. Phones. You really think no one saw what happened? The detective hesitated. There is footage, he admitted. My heart jumped. From a neighbor's? From her, he said quietly. I blinked. From her? She was recording when the incident occurred, he explained. Her phone captured part of the encounter. For the first time since the shooting, I felt something other than fear. Hope. If you have that video, I said, then you'll see the truth. The detective studied me for a long moment. We're in the process of obtaining it. That night, while my daughter lay unconscious in a hospital bed, fighting to survive, the HOA Karen's lawyer arrived at the police station. By morning, the story had already started to spread online. HOA board member shoots dog in self-defense, one headline read. Another suggested my daughter had been caught in the crossfire. I felt sick. Then, just before sunrise, the detective returned. His expression was different now, tighter, focused. We got the footage, he said. My heart pounded. And he leaned in closer and lowered his voice. She forgot something, he said. The video doesn't show what she claims it does. I gripped the edge of the chair. What does it show? The detective exhaled slowly. It shows the dog never moved, and it shows your daughter begging her to stop. In that moment, I knew the truth was finally clawing its way to the surface. But I also knew something else. The fight for justice had only just begun. The first time I saw the video, my hands went numb. The detective played it on a tablet in a small, windowless room at the hospital. No sound at first, just the image shaky and slightly tilted, like the person filming hadn't expected anything dramatic to happen. That alone told me something important. People who act in self-defense don't usually start recording before they're in danger. The footage showed Lily standing on the sidewalk, Max sitting calmly at her side. You could hear fireworks in the background, see flashes of light in the sky. My daughter's shoulders were hunched, her hands tight around the leash, her posture small and careful. The HOA Karen's voice came through clearly when the detective turned the volume up. You can't be here, she said sharply. This is private property. Lily responded quietly, her voice barely carrying over noise. My dad said it's okay. We're just watching the fireworks. The camera zoomed in slightly, focusing on Max. Max didn't move. He didn't bark again. He didn't lunge. He didn't even stand up. Then the video caught something else. The HOA Karen's hand disappearing into her purse. Lily noticed it too. You could see her flinch, her grip tightening on the leash. Please don't, Lily said. He's not doing anything. The camera shook as the HOA Karen raised her arm. The shot echoed through the tiny room as if it had just happened again. The detective paused the video before the second shot. That's enough, I said, my voice hollow. The detective nodded and turned the tablet off. She claimed the dog charged. He said, but this footage makes that impossible. I wiped my face with both hands, my chest aching. So, you're charging her? We're escalating, he replied carefully. But I need you to understand something. I looked up. She's already retained legal counsel, he continued, and her attorney is pushing hard for self-defense. Of course she was. By that afternoon, the video was no longer just in police hands. Someone had leaked it. I was sitting beside Lily's hospital bed when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, notifications. A nurse asked me to step outside because the noise was upsetting Lily, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. In the hallway, I opened my phone. The video was everywhere. Neighbors had shared it. Local pages had reposted it. News outlets were embedding it into breaking news articles. The same woman who had calmly shot a child was now being watched by thousands of people who could see the truth with their own eyes. And they were furious. Protesters gathered outside the HOA Karen's house by evening. Signs went up demanding her arrest, demanding the HOA be investigated, demanding answers. The HOA board released a statement within hours claiming they were deeply concerned and cooperating fully with authorities. It was empty language, the kind designed to protect reputations, not people. But the damage was done. Other neighbors started speaking up. One by one, they came forward with stories. She'd threatened to call the police on a teenager for skateboarding. She'd tried to fine a widow for leaving her Christmas lights up too long. She'd screamed at a delivery driver and accused him of trespassing. And now she had gone too far. At the hospital, Lily finally woke up long enough to talk. Her voice was weak, her face pale, but her eyes were clear. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked me. I shook my head, immediately leaning close to her. "No, you didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing." Tears slid down her cheeks. I was scared. She kept yelling. I thought she was going to hurt Max. I swallowed hard. "She did," I said quietly, "but she's not going to get away with it." 2 days later, the charges were announced. The HOA, Karen, was arrested at her home in front of cameras and neighbors alike. This time, she wasn't wrapped in a blanket or protected by confusion. She was handcuffed, her face hidden behind sunglasses, her jaw clenched as reporters shouted questions she refused to answer. The charges were severe: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, animal cruelty resulting in death, reckless endangerment of a minor. Her attorney called the arrest premature. The public called it justice. Inside the courtroom at her arraignment, I sat behind the prosecutor, my hands folded so tightly my fingers hurt. Lily wasn't there, doctors said it was too soon, but her presence filled every inch of that room. The prosecutor played the video again. This time, there was no arguing with it. The judge watched in silence, his expression darkening with each passing second. When the footage ended, he looked directly at the defendant. "Self-defense requires an immediate threat," he said slowly. "This video shows none." The HOA Karen's face drained of color. Bail was denied. As she was led away, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not satisfaction, but resolve. Because while the truth had finally surfaced, the fight wasn't over. The HOA was still standing. The trauma was still real. And my daughter still had a long road ahead. Justice had taken its first step, but the consequences were about to go even further than anyone expected. The arrest didn't calm things down. If anything, it poured gasoline on a fire that had already spread far beyond our street. By the next morning, news vans lined the road outside the HOA Karen's house. Reporters stood in the cold, rehearsing their lines, while neighbors hovered nearby, some furious, some shaken, all of them aware that their quiet community had become a national headline overnight. At the hospital, Lily slept most of the day. Doctors said the bullet had narrowly missed anything vital, but the damage was still serious. Surgery had stopped the bleeding, but recovery would be slow. Pain came in waves, and fear came even faster. She startled at sudden noises. She flinched when nurses entered the room too quickly. And every time she woke up, the first thing she asked about was Max. I didn't have the heart to lie to her anymore. One afternoon, when the room was quiet and the machines hummed softly, she looked at me and said, "Dad, he's not coming back, is he?" I shook my head, my throat tightening. "No, sweetheart, he's not." She turned her face toward the window and cried silently, her shoulders trembling beneath the blankets. That was when the weight of everything finally crushed me. Not the court dates, not the headlines, not even the shooting itself. It was watching my child grieve something pure and innocent that never should have been taken from her. Outside those hospital walls, the fallout continued. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, then another. Emails leaked online showing panic, finger-pointing, and quiet attempts to distance themselves from the woman they had empowered for years. One board member resigned within 48 hours. Another followed the next day. Residents demanded answers. Why had this woman been allowed to harass families unchecked? Why were complaints ignored? Why had fear become policy? A week after the shooting, the HOA suspended all enforcement activities until further notice. Yard violation letters stopped. Fines were frozen. Patrols ended. It felt less like a pause and more like a collapse. Then the lawsuit started. Families who had been threatened came forward. Homeowners who had paid questionable fines hired lawyers. Even the city began investigating whether the HOA had exceeded its legal authority. The woman who once stood on her porch watching everyone else now sat alone in a cell, denied bail, her name synonymous with cruelty and abuse. In court, her defense strategy unraveled piece by piece. They tried to discredit the video. They tried to question witness credibility. They even tried to suggest that Lily's injuries were exaggerated. That last attempt backfired spectacularly. The judge shut it down immediately, warning the defense that any further attacks on a minor victim would not be tolerated. The courtroom murmured with quiet approval. For the first time, I saw something crack in the HOA Karen's composure. She looked smaller now, older, no longer protected by authority or paperwork. Meanwhile, support poured in from places we never expected. Strangers sent letters to the hospital. Donations appeared to help with medical bills. People shared stories of their own experiences with unchecked power, with institutions that forgot the people they were meant to serve. Lily read some of the letters when she felt strong enough. They made her smile just a little. But healing isn't linear. Some nights she woke up screaming. Some days she refused to walk near the window. And sometimes she sat quietly, clutching Max's old collar like a lifeline. The doctors recommended therapy, trauma counseling, time. Time felt like the one thing we didn't have enough of. Then came the moment that surprised everyone. The city announced it was moving to dissolve the HOA entirely. An independent review had found systemic abuse of authority, lack of oversight, and a pattern of intimidation. The board's power was stripped. Assets were frozen pending investigation. The HOA Karen had built her identity on control. Now, the system she ruled no longer existed. On the day the announcement went public, I was sitting beside Lily when a nurse turned on the TV quietly in the corner. A reporter spoke solemnly about a community reckoning and the dangers of unchecked local power. Lily looked at the screen, then back at me. "So she can't hurt anyone else?" she asked. "No," I said. "She can't." She nodded slowly, as if filing that information away somewhere deep inside herself. But even as justice seemed to ripple outward, there was one question still hanging in the air. What would happen when the final verdict came down? Because the prosecution wasn't just seeking punishment. They were seeking a statement. And the judge, everyone could tell, was prepared to make one. The date was set. The courtroom would be full. And the outcome would change more than just one life. The countdown to judgment had begun. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt heavy, deliberate. Not the nervous silence from earlier hearings, not the murmurs of reporters or the shifting of bodies in the benches, but a stillness that came from everyone knowing this moment mattered. This was the end of excuses, the end of delays, the end of pretending. The HOA, Karen sat at the defense table, hands folded tightly in front of her, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She wore a plain outfit now, no bold colors, no symbols of authority. Gone was the woman who once patrolled sidewalks like she owned them. In her place sat someone stripped of power, waiting for judgment. Lily wasn't in the courtroom. The doctors and therapists agreed it was too much for her. Instead, she stayed home, wrapped in blankets, clutching Max's collar, watching cartoons that she barely followed. I carried her presence with me, every step, every breath. The prosecutor stood and delivered the closing statement without raising his voice. He didn't need to. He talked about responsibility, about restraint, about how fear does not justify violence, and authority does not excuse cruelty. He spoke about a child who followed the rules, about a dog who never left her side, and about a woman who chose to pull a trigger instead of walking away. The defense tried one last time. They talked about stress, about fear, about misunderstandings. The judge listened patiently, then leaned forward. "This case," he said, "is not complicated." The room held its breath. "The evidence is clear. The video is clear. The harm is undeniable. This court will not excuse the use of deadly force against a child and an animal who posed no threat." He paused, letting his words settle. The defendant abused the authority she believed she had, and in doing so destroyed lives. The sentence was read slowly. Years in prison, a permanent criminal record, a lifetime ban from serving in any position of authority, restitution for medical costs, mandatory psychological evaluation. As the words echoed through the courtroom, I didn't feel relief. I felt exhaustion. The HOA Karen's shoulders slumped for the first time. Her attorney leaned in to whisper something, but she didn't respond. She stared at the table, as if seeing it for the first time, as if finally understanding that the power she once wielded was gone forever. When it was over, reporters rushed forward. Cameras flashed. Microphones extended. I walked past them all. At home, Lily was waiting. She sat up when I walked in, searching my face before I even spoke. "It's done," I said softly. She nodded, processing the words slowly. "She can't come back?" "No," I said. "She can't." Lily exhaled, a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding for months. She leaned back against the pillows, her fingers tightening around Max's collar. "I still miss him," she whispered. "I know," I said, sitting beside her. "I do too." Healing didn't arrive with the verdict. It didn't magically erase the nightmares or the flinches or the fear that crept in when she heard loud noises. Therapy became part of our routine. So did patience. So did learning that recovery isn't about forgetting, it's about learning how to live with what happened. The neighborhood changed. Without the HOA, people talked again. Kids rode bikes without fear. Holiday decorations stayed up a little longer. Neighbors checked in on each other instead of reporting each other. A memorial for Max was placed near the sidewalk where everything happened. Flowers, a small plaque, a reminder of what was lost and why it should never happen again. Sometimes, I catch Lily standing there quietly just for a moment before turning back toward home. She's stronger now. She laughs again. She walks the block with friends. And someday, she says she wants another dog, not to replace Max, but to honor him. As for me, I learned something I'll never forget. Power doesn't always come with a badge or a gun. Sometimes it comes with a clipboard, a title, or a sense of entitlement. And when that power goes unchecked, it can be just as dangerous. This story isn't just about one woman. It's about what happens when communities stay silent. When fear replaces compassion. When authority goes unchallenged. Justice was served, but the scars remain. And every New Year's Eve, when the fireworks begin to light up the sky, we hold each other a little tighter and remember how close we came to losing everything. If this story affected you, even a little, I want you to pause for a moment and think about why. Because this wasn't just about one HOA Karen, one neighborhood, or one night. It was about what happens when ordinary people stay silent while power is abused right in front of them. It was about a child who did nothing wrong, a family that paid a price no rule should ever demand, and a community that finally decided enough was enough. If you've ever been bullied, threatened, or made to feel small by someone hiding behind authority, you're not alone. And stories like this matter because they remind us that speaking up can change outcomes, not just for us, but for everyone around us. I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you seen power misused in your own community? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us which city you're watching from. Your voice matters more than you think. If you believe real stories should expose injustice and protect the innocent, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. These stories don't end when the video ends. They start conversations that can prevent the next tragedy. And stay with us, because the next story will remind you just how powerful the truth can be when it finally comes out.